Passive real estate investing. It has to be one of the most exciting concepts of this entire industry. And quite frankly, for me, it's one of the most exciting concepts for me in life and in work. Why? Because it means I get to make money with minimal work, little to no effort. Hello, it's the best way to make money. Don't get me wrong, I'm willing to work for the money, but if there's a chance to make money without a lot of work from me, who am I to say no? Of course I'm going to say yes. And real estate investing is one of the primary industries where you really can get what is considered to be passive income. Passive real estate investing. It is, at its most fundamental, important level, the key to financial freedom. Because if you want true financial freedom, it means you're making money without having to work for it. You basically get to live the retired life. Passive income and passive real estate investing are huge. Now, with all that hype and all that excitement, there is something that I have seen people do wrong time and time again in passive real estate investing. And it's so critical. I'm making a video about it, but it's so critical because it really, truly goobers up people's investments. Like, I've seen drastically negative things happen because people are doing this thing. So, I'm going to tell you what that thing is. The number one thing that you need to make sure you're not doing with your passive real estate investments. Are you ready? Okay. The number one thing that you should make sure that you do not do with your passive investments is this. Be 100% passive. Well, if that wasn't a buzzkill and a half, because it's like all this excitement about not working for my money and this passive income, and now you're saying not to be 100% passive. Correct. That means you heard me. So, yes, buzzkill. Not the most exciting thing we've heard all day, but it's important and you need to understand it, and I'm going to dive into why. I'm first going to give you a couple different perceptions about the definition of passive real estate investing or passive income. Then I'm going to give you a little insight into where different strategies fall in terms of how passive can you really be. And then I'm going to end with the most important thing. When I say that I see people all the time being 100% passive with their passive investments, and obviously that's a problem, what does that mean? What are those things that they're not doing that they should be doing? And in my mind, there are three things. So when you're investing in passive investments, you need to make sure, despite how passive you think it's going to be, there are three things that you actually do need to do. So I'm going to end with that. So stick with me here. Now, we're going to have some fun for this little perception of passive income. I actually Googled. I wanted to see what the Google had to say about passive real estate investing. And each of these phrases I pulled literally from, I didn't even click on a link, from each little preview snippet of different articles. There were little explanations or illustrations or definitions of passive real estate investments or passive income. So I'm going to read off a handful of those for you. One called it a hands-off strategy. Okay? Another one said, you give your money to someone and they do the work for you. That's cool. I love when people do the work for me. Income stream that's somewhat automated. Okay, now we're getting into something interesting. Generate income without significant active participation. Okay? And the last one I wrote down was create earnings without having to be actively involved. Now, there's something about all of those different phrases that I want you to be aware of. Some people say that passive real estate investing means hands-off. That would suggest to me 0% active participation or work or effort. Others, like somewhat automated, without significant active participation, which would suggest that some active participation may be warranted. And nope, this one was without having to be actively involved. Okay, I think that suggests that there could be some level of involvement. But do you see where, and if you Google this for yourself, and if you talk to people about passive income or passive investing, There is a wide variety of definitions of what that really means. There's even the definition that's just for the IRS, whether they categorize something as an active investment or a passive investment. So there's the IRS's definition, and then there's our definitions. And because passive income and passive investments have been for so long advertised as hands-off, mailbox money, right? You sit back and you just wait for the money to show up in your mailbox. What I have seen people do, and is the whole reason I'm recording this video, what I see them do is take it way too seriously, and they don't do bupkis for their investments. That's what we're working with here, is there's a question of, can you really get away with doing zero work, or do you need to have some level of participation? And if so, what? So now let's go to the second thing I said we were going to talk about, different investment strategies. If you picture a spectrum, on one end of the spectrum is going to be your most active, involved, high participation investing strategies. Wholesaling is probably the most active. Not far behind that would be flipping. Depending on how you set it up, you could make it more passive. And then over here, as we start to get more and more passive, then we get into rental properties. And to the closest passive line, we get into things like investing in syndications and notes. So there's this whole spectrum. And I want to highlight one chunk on this spectrum. It's the rental properties. Even with rental properties, let's say, we have fully active, fully passive. Let's actually make two lines for rental properties. There's rental properties that you are landlording, and there's rental properties that are being managed by a property manager. And somewhere in that, more on the landlording side, is, are you having to rehab and fix up the property as well? Just in rental properties alone, there's a spectrum of how passive the rental property is to how active it is. Now, the IRS considers all the rental properties passive. Cool. But that doesn't mean that you are being hands-off. You may be putting a lot of work into it and landlording, day-to-day management, all that. So I share all of that just to get your juices flowing about where on that spectrum are you? I've heard people say that they really want passive income, and they're like, I think I'm going to start with wholesaling. Okay, that's the least passive thing you could possibly do. So it's important to understand the spectrum. Now look, if you wanted to be the most passive, you'd probably get out of real estate investing and go invest in stocks. Let's be honest, but stocks aren't nearly as fun, and quite frankly, they're not in your control. So let's bring it back to real estate investing. Now, we talked about which investments are different levels of passivity. The last thing I promised you, the most important, is if somebody is being 100% passive, and I'm knocking that, and I'm saying that's wrong and you shouldn't do that, what does that mean that they're not doing? Because if you get into an investment, you want to be aware of where your participation may be preferred or required. So, what are those three things I said? If you have the willingness to do the following three things, you can get away with your passive investments with still participating, in my opinion. Number one, and this should not be sacrificed no matter what strategy you're doing, due diligence. I don't care what you're buying. I don't care what you're investing in. Learn how to do due diligence and do it so then you can be as passive as possible. I see so many people not do due diligence. For example, I had a guy last year who bought a property. Something happened with the condition of it, and he was like, I can't believe this happened. I said, my first question was, well, did you look back on your inspection report and see if that particular thing was mentioned? And his exact, it's painful. His exact words to me were, oh yeah, I remember getting a copy of the inspection, but I didn't actually open it. Okay. Cool. Right? And he wanted to blame everyone else. Yes, he was buying a passive investment, a passive rental property. It was a turnkey property, which is pitched as the most hands-off rental property possible. That does not mean he should not have done due diligence. Had he done due diligence, this whole big expense could have been avoided. He didn't even open the document of the property inspection. If you don't do that, you can't be mad at everybody else. It is your job to do due diligence. That is very hard to roll off the tongue. So first thing that you have to be doing on even the most passive investment, due diligence. And let's say that you're buying notes or syndications or something, so you don't actually have the property that you have to do property due diligence on. You should be doing due diligence at least with who you're investing with and who's in charge of all this. Where are you getting these investments from? Who, as with a syndication, who and what are you buying into? There is still a due diligence period. So that's number one. Number two, I want to see you have a willingness to make decisions. I know, seems kind of easy, right? But you'd be surprised how many of these passive investors get a call that something's going on and they're just like, I guess, I'm sure, okay, cool. Oh my God. You can be as passive all day long until your phone rings, and then, in my mind, you have got to be willing to make a decision. Don't just leave it in other people's hands. What was that one phrase someone said? You give your money to someone and they do the work for you. Yes, that's true, but that doesn't mean that you're completely removed. Be willing to make decisions. And then the third thing, on a similar note to number two, is be willing to make a change. So let's give the example of a rental property with a property manager. I know this from experience, unfortunately, from several instances of this happening. The property manager, who, yes, that person, I gave my money to someone and they're doing the work for me, but at some point in the relationship with the property manager, that property manager really started to suck. I've seen so many people in the same position and they just kind of sit back and they're like, they said it would get better, or like, I'm sure they know what they're doing, or, it probably wasn't their fault, or whatever. And I was one of these people. I was always the one that when the property manager said they would get better, I believed them, because I believe everything everyone tells me. I believed them, so I let them go way too long, and it ended up costing me a fortune. Not being passive in a passive investment means that you have a willingness to make a change. In those scenarios, I had to make the effort to fire that property manager and get a new one. I'm willing to make changes. So, due diligence, I don't care what strategy you're involved in, whatever level of due diligence is required to verify what you're doing, do it. That's the biggest chunk of your work. And the good news is, once you do that once, then it's just management and maintenance after that. So it's a temporary thing. It's kind of like if you write a book and then you keep selling it for years to come, that's passive income. But that doesn't mean you didn't do the work for it in the beginning. So do the due diligence in the beginning. Then have a willingness to make decisions. It sounds obvious. You'd be surprised how many people do not have that willingness. And then you have the willingness to make a change. And you actually exert the effort to implement that change. So, maybe we can bring this back to good news. The good news is, yes, passive real estate investing can still be super passive. On a normal year with all my rental properties, if nothing crazy is going on, I spend 5 minutes or less, honestly, in a year on my rental properties. It's that passive. And my favorite example, I was not expecting to give this example, but my favorite example is my properties all had property managers. I was actually in Nicaragua one year, years ago. I was in the pool, I had a pina colada in my hand, and I get a message from my property manager saying a storm had just blown through the town and half my roof from my rental property was now missing. And so I was like, ooh, that sucks. I hung up with him. I called the insurance company to file a claim. The insurance company got the property manager's phone number so the adjuster could meet him at the property. That was the last thing I ever did with it. I never had to do another thing with the roof of that rental property, and the whole thing got fixed and replaced. Great. I never left the pool, and I never put my pina colada down. That's freaking passive. I love it. So in a normal year, no, I don't do a lot of work. But am I keeping an eye on things? Yes. Am I willing to make a decision? Yes. Am I willing to make changes if need be? Abso-freaking-lutely. It does not mean that you get to sleep through all of your investments. You have to be willing to become active if the situation warrants it. Whew! That's my spiel. Don't be 100% passive and don't be 100% hands-off. When it's warranted, great. Kick back with your pina colada in the pool and do nothing. Collect your mailbox money, but don't sleep through everything, and don't only assume that other people are going to do the work for you. I have seen it get so many people in trouble. It's crazy. So I don't mean this how bad it's going to sound, but turn your brain on. Just be present to what's going on. That's all you got to do. And then you get to enjoy your mailbox money. It's not hard. Just be willing to do it.